Okay, making kimchi is a multi-step process that will result in you having vegetables or proteins, could be meat or fish in some very classic Korean preparations, that is preserved and can stay preserved for very long periods of time depending on what it is. Cabbage kimchi, vegetable kimchi can be aged for several years and is appreciated as growing and aging and maturing as it ages. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year old kimchi that are appreciated by different people at different ranges. What we've done so far is we've taken our cabbage and we have salted it. The ratio of salt to vegetable is important. Depending on how long you're planning on aging the kimchi or how much you want to preserve it, you would add anywhere from 2.5 to 5% salt. Since we don't preserve this for very long and we don't need it to age for a year or more, generally we use it up within a couple of weeks, 3% salt seems to be palatable and productive. Less than 2.5%, the fermentation would not take hold properly. Over 5% is unpalatably salty to most people. So this is cabbage that has been salted with 3% of its weight by salt. In other words, if we had 100 pounds of cabbage, we would use 3 pounds of salt. So you'll have to get out a calculator and do the calculations. If you're doing 4 or 6 or 8 pounds of something, how many ounces is that? And what is 3% of that is in ounces. You add the salt, you mix it with the vegetables, and you allow it to drain for several hours. The salt draws the liquid out of the vegetable, resulting in a brine, which will collect in the bottom of the drain pan. You then add the vegetable back to the brine, along with all the salt. Remember, we're trying to maintain that 3% ratio, so we don't lose or waste any of the salt. It's all trapped. And then we have a mixture of aromatics and spices, daikon, garlic, scallions, red chili paste or red chili powder, and a little bit of a cooked rice preparation that loosely translates to rice porridge. This is a mixture of rice flour and water that's cooked like a slurry would be cooked. That's an important component in the making of kimchi, in that the addition of the starch in the rice helps the fermentation, and the addition of the protein in the rice as the protein ferments will start to lend an umami sense to the kimchi, so it gives it depth of flavor that you otherwise wouldn't get. Now you can cut or prepare the kimchi in various sizes or shapes depending on what you have. Quite often a whole head of cabbage would be cut into 1/6 or 1/8 or quarters depending on its size, and the mixture of salt and seasonings would be rubbed in between each leaf, and the heads would be kept semi-intact. What we have here are loose leaves because we had other uses for other parts of the heads of cabbage, and rather than waste it all, we're turning these leaves into kimchi. So now that this is mixed, we're going to place it firmly into a plastic container. We're going to make sure that we don't lose any of the salt or any of the seasonings. When the container is completely full up to the top, we're going to apply a considerable amount of pressure. I'm going to press down very firmly with my hands, trying to draw out as much or squeeze out as much liquid as I can. The idea is the cabbage will be covered with the liquid, submerged so that bad bacteria, rather than the beneficial bacteria that we're trying to foster, bad bacteria won't be able to form. Initially, we probably won't get enough liquid out of here to make that happen, but by sitting in the refrigerator overnight or over the course of a couple of days, the salt will continue to draw water out of the cabbage, and the liquid will submerge fairly quickly, in a matter of a day or two, the cabbage. And once the cabbage is submerged, it's pretty well protected from the anything off-putting bad bacteria that might be in the atmosphere. Traditionally, the containers that the kimchi were made and then stored in would have heavy crockery lids with long stems on them. So it would be like putting a big heavy stone with a long stem on the end of it that would press down on the vegetables and keep it submerged till enough liquid was formed to cover it. Obviously we don't have that situation here, so we just apply as much manual pressure as we can and cover it tightly and check it in a day or two to make sure that the liquid level has risen. It almost always does, and if by chance a little bit of the vegetable is poking up over the top of the liquid, we just remove the pack of the wrapping and just press it down under the liquid, and then reseal it with plastic wrap and a tight-fitting lid on the container, and that is sufficient. This same procedure would be used for any kind of vegetable. We do radish, daikon, cabbage, and cucumber in this class. Also, as I mentioned earlier, in Korean tradition, they would do a lot of different kinds of seafood, whole fish, like cod, or pollock, shellfish, like oysters or clams, and cephalopods, cuttlefish, squid, octopus, things of that nature, and also sometimes poultry, game birds, like partridges or pheasants, would be used for special occasions. The seafood and the meat are typically not put down for very long periods of time, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just enough to slightly pickle them and flavor them. It's somewhat about preservation, but more about flavor. The vegetables are, by design, preserved to get you, the farmer, through a long, cold winter with something to eat. Much in the same way as cabbage turned into sauerkraut in Eastern Europe. So now we've applied quite a bit of pressure, squeezed out as much of the air as we can, formed as much of the liquid as we can. We'll put a tight-fitting lid on top. We'll label it, date it, check it tomorrow and the day after to make sure the liquid level has risen to cover the cabbage entirely, and allow it to ferment for several weeks. At room temperature, between 65 and 75 degrees, it would be mildly fermented, mildly tart, in about 5 days. In the refrigerator, this will take about 3 weeks to accomplish. If you have stable temperature in a basement or in a root cellar, it would be better than at room temperature, like in a commercial kitchen where the temperature can swing 30 or 40 degrees between service and the middle of the night. So you're better to do it under a controlled environment like a refrigerator or a storage cellar than you are at kitchen temperature.